All right. Welcome everyone. You've obviously heard my dicta going on here. I am Dr. Anansi Wilson, Associate Professor of Law here at Mitchell Hamlin, but also the founding director of the Center for the Study of Black Life and the Law, where we're principally interested in the intersections of not just race, law, and sexuality, but we're trying to think critically about the ways in which law orders and disorders Black living and dying, and how have Black people across space and time responded to the obstacles and opportunities of law. And so today we're really interested in hearing from a Black woman's perspective, particularly Black women students and also Black women alumni, why Juneteenth is important to us in this moment personally, but also as a Black community and also to the country writ large, but also for Black futures, right? Black presence and also the past. So with that, I'm going to give each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, whichever way that they feel is important. And with that, we'll start with Jillian, my fave. How are you, love?
I am good. I knew you'd call on me first.
Yes.
My name is Jillian Wangi. I am a first generation law student and recent graduate of Mitchell Hamlin School of Law. I originally hailed from Kenya, and I immigrated here to the States when I was 6 and grew up in Missouri, where I earned my Bachelor's of Science in Health Science. And that's really what really started my passion and eventually led to my law school. I became really passionate about public health and what that means about creating public health education opportunities for disparate communities, especially going to school in rural Kirksville, where the community had a lack of resources when it came to public education. I came to law school and focused my studies mainly on courses within the Healthcare Institute. I also I was part of BALSA, and I served as the social media chair as well as the president for this most recent academic year, and also worked for Dr. Wilson with the Center for Study of Black Life and the Law as their marketing assistant, social media person, I guess. And yeah, that's me.
Yes, yes, yes. Jillian has been a godsend. If you've seen any flyers from me, Jillian made it because I have no visual intelligence. I only know words. So thank you to Jillian for all the things. Demetria, how you doing? What's up?
Yes. Hi, everyone. So nice to be here with all of you. Thank you, Dr. Wilson, for the invitation. Thank you, Jillian, for making all those flyers. They all looked amazing. So thank you for that. But my name is Demetria Kelly, and I'm a current law student at Mitchell Hamlin. Wow, I can't believe I'm in the room with all of this greatness. This is actually a second career for me. So I focused on health equity in my previous roles, and I wanted to go to law school since I was 15, but I never seen an attorney in my life. I grew up in the inner city of Minneapolis, and I wanted to go to law school. So here I am. I full circle came back to Minneapolis, and now I'm here. I am one of the only Black women in my law school cohort, and that is something that I talk about often, and I just want to see some change. So working with all of you with the center, I just hope that we can continue to persevere and try to find a way that we can continue to get our people and through the process and not have those barriers in place, and also be a resource while we're going through the process. Like you all have been a resource and a support system for me. A little bit more about myself. I do work at a nonprofit law firm here in Minneapolis. I work serving underrepresented communities with housing, eviction, expungements, and people with disabilities as well, individuals with disabilities, excuse me. And I received my master's in healthcare. And so health equity is important to me. I have a daughter that has sickle cell, so I always am champion for for my daughter and for those that are impacted. And so that's my space. I am very happy to be here with all of you and hear all of your words and sentiments about Juneteenth, because it's important and it's impactful. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for mentioning sickle cell. I feel like, I mean, you talk about this all the time, which I'm so happy for, but it's something that affects the Black community very, very critically, particularly knowing that most of us, or I shouldn't say most of, many people don't have access to adequate healthcare. And the healthcare that we do have is oftentimes anti-Black and subpar in so many other ways that we don't have time to articulate. So thank you for bringing that to the fore.
Can I
Uh,
add something, Dr. Wilson, really quickly?
Go ahead.
So Juneteenth, we just did a proclamation today. Juneteenth and World Sickle Cell Day is on the same day, June 19th. So we celebrate both. So I know we should have our own day, we should have our own day, but we do celebrate. There's a world proclamation for that. So I wanted to add that as well, since we're talking about Juneteenth. So
I mean, if we're being serious, and I mean, obviously, I want to not take too much time because I know how I can get on my little soapbox here and become a
Right.
reverend, not collegial reverend, but I could be a reverend for a moment. But it's really important for us to think about, sickle cell as a kind of consequence, right, of the type of deprivation and dispossession of slavery. Right. And so I don't think it's a problem that they're on the same day. So I think they're deeply intertwined because we're talking about the ways in which Black bodies are kind of situated to have skewed life chances. And there are various innumerable, inarticulable ways that this occurs. So thank you for that. Ashlyn.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ashlyn Crawford. I am an attorney at Hennepin County Attorney's Office. I work in the youth prosecution office. I graduated last year. Deidre, you're unmuted. What's funny? I'm kidding. Yeah, I'm from the north side of Minneapolis. I was born in Washington, D.C., but I grew up on the north side. And, my law school journey was an interesting one, but my dad is a firefighter from Minneapolis. And my mom is a nurse. So I just grew up in a household where we just served people. And that was just always on my heart to serve my community. And so that's one of the reasons why I went to law school. I'm especially excited to be here today because I love Black people. I love Black culture. I love Black food. Blackity black, black, black. I'm just really excited and proud to be part of this conversation. And yeah, I'm excited to get into it and have a bigger discussion after we all kind of give our little tidbit. So happy to be here.
Happy to see you again, twice in 1 week. Thank you for your consistent brilliance, Ashlyn. Ashlyn, if I don't know, was one of my best students ever, so I always am happy to see her on the screen and off the screen. Calandra Reverie, the OG in the room. How are you? What's going on?
Good, good. I am so happy to be here, Dr. Wilson. I can remember being where all of you were at one point. The best thing that William Mitchell, that's now Mitchell Hamlin, has done is to hire Dr. Wilson. I wish that he would have been there when I was in law school because you all are receiving such a huge benefit. When I moved here from Milwaukee in 1998, I moved here as a single parent. I brought my Section 8. I was on welfare and I was doing it on my own. My mother moved here from Las Vegas. She is still here. So I did it not only as a first generation law student, but as a single parent. And what we had to do is we had to create the support that we needed. So I'm so glad you all have much more support. And I'm really happy to be here with all of you. So I'm in private practice. I had to create my own space because my personality didn't fit with a lot of the lawyers that you see nowadays. And I really wanted to just be me. And being me has helped me in so many ways. And one of the reasons that you all aren't treated so badly in court is because they treated me bad. They don't do it anymore, trust me. So I'm glad to be here with all of you, and I can't wait to get more into the conversation.
Thank you. And listen, it's so interesting, always hearing your story and talking with you, Calandra, because I feel like we're really thinking about a different type of ancestry, like one that is still living. You talk about, coming here and, being on welfare and being a single mother. At the same time, when I talk to my mom every day and thinking about what does it mean, right, to have been raised on welfare, right, to be raised the first child of a single mother at 16, right, and then to be able to kind of stand in this space and to have this conversation and have that kind of I don't want to necessarily say back thinking knowledge, but being able to apply knowledge backwards to think about, wow, my mother's struggles weren't about her, right? They're about the situation that she was born in, that her mother was born in, that her mother's mother's mother was born in. And the beauty of it, and the beauty I think of Black women oftentimes, is the ability to persist. Right. So I thank you for that meditation and that reminder about what does it mean, right, to sit in this moment and to stand in the gap and to sometimes be the first person right? To stand in the gap and to take those licks. So before we get into our kind of early meditation or individual meditations on what Juneteenth means to us and what it means for the community, what it means going forward for Black histories, herstories, presents and futures, I want to read a quote by Saidiya Hartman. And this quote comes from one of her early books that if you haven't read it before, please read it. I'll put the title and everything in the chat in a second. But the quote reads, "If slavery persists as an issue in the political life of Black America, it is not because of an antiquarian obsession with bygone days or the burden of a too long ago memory, but because Black lives are still imperiled and devalued by a racial calculus and a political arithmetic that were entrenched centuries ago. This is the afterlife of slavery. Skewed life chances, limited access to health and education, premature death, incarceration, and impoverishment." I'll read that one more time, then I'll put it in the chat. "If slavery persists as an issue in the political life of Black America, it is not because of an antiquarian obsession with bygone days or the burden of a too long memory, but because Black lives are still imperiled and devalued by a racial calculus and a political arithmetic that were entrenched centuries ago. This is the afterlife of slavery: skewed life chances, limited access to health and education, premature death, incarceration, and impoverishment." This is Saidiya Hartman from Lose Your Mother, A Journey Along the Atlantic Slave Routes, which is a kind of travel memoir that is quite the read. So with that in mind, I will open it up for our meditations. And sorry, before I do that, if you have questions, if you have comments, please, or reactions, please feel free to use the chat. I check it very quickly, and hopefully we'll be able to get your questions up to the board rather promptly. So Jillian, we're going to come back to you to give our first meditation. Take your time.
Thank you. When Dr. Wilson posed this question to us, it forced me to sort of go back and research the term Juneteenth. I think it's something that I've known for a long time. It's something obviously celebrated in our communities. It's taught in schools, but never really highlighted in a very specific way. And so I wanted to research the history. And so, just the abridged version is that Juneteenth came 2 years after President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. And it stemmed from Galveston, Texas, when this general came in and announced to the enslaved people that they were free, that they were no longer part of chattel slavery. That's a very abridged version. And it symbolizes the sort of refounding of America and this opportunity to reimagine of what America could be outside of chattel slavery. But we obviously know that that wasn't a straightforward or easy path. And Juneteenth is an opportunity to not only commemorate the horrific situations that enslaved people experienced prior to the Emancipation Proclamation, prior to Juneteenth, but also an opportunity to recognize the perseverance and the growth in Black people, in the Black community, Black joy, and the sacrifices that have led us to where we are today, and also to remember those who we've lost. Today is June 15th, and I was watching earlier as Representative Ruth Richardson was highlighting that today is the anniversary of one of the worst lynchings in Duluth, Minnesota. And it's important to recognize those names: Elias Clayton, Elmer Jackson, and Isaac McGee. And those lives lost prior to Juneteenth, and all of the lives that have lost even most recently as just a few weeks ago on June 2nd. The loss of Black lives has been persistent. And so Juneteenth is an opportunity to recognize and remember those people, remember those lives, and remember sacrifices that have been made, and reflect on where do we go from here. We've come so far. We've grown as a community. We've grown in the access to opportunities that we have in the Black community, but what do we do from here? In our current political landscape, we're seeing the threat to Black liberties all over again. We're seeing the threat to our constitutional liberties. It is Pride Month. We have to recognize our Black queer folks who are also being targeted not just by their Blackness, but also their identities within the LGBTQ community, with legislations banning the word gay, banning the topics of being gay. We're seeing this attack on just the ability to exist as human beings. And so Juneteenth was a nexus of refounding, but I feel like today in 2023, we're at a new nexus. We're at a new crossroads. And this Juneteenth, I'll be thinking about what I can do as a newly graduated law student who has this knowledge and who has the opportunities and the ability moving forward as part of my status, but also just as a Black woman who has a position of power moving forward. And I also want to go back to quote Representative Richardson, because she said something that really stood out to me. She said, "Joy is an act of resistance. When your humanity has been stripped away from you, when you have your joy, you have your survival." And so how can you take our Black joy and continue to survive moving forward?
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. That last quote reminds me too of like the kind of the old homage, right? That, you know, Black people have to work twice as hard to get half as far. And one of my mentors, Christina Sharp, and also Zakiya Iman Jackson, who wrote the book Becoming Human, talking about how Black people's struggle to kind of fit into the category of human has been a kind of a failed experiment. She was once asked, you know, about Black excellence. And she said in response that, you know, Black excellence is the wrong answer to a racist question. Why must Black people be excellent? Right. So, you know, we talk about this kind of striving for joy that you're talking about, and joy is an act. But I think so many of us have this notion that in order to just afford to be alive, right, we have to demonstrate excellence. And what would it mean if mediocre Black people could thrive too? Right, just like other mediocre folks. So something to thrive on. Demetria.
Yes, thank you so much for that. And yeah, so I was meditating on this, on your question that you sent Dr. Wilson as well. And I had to go back and do some research and say, like, what does Juneteenth mean to me as a Black woman, a single mother that's, you know, inner city, comes from all of this different background, had less than adequate resources? What does that mean for me? What does it mean when we should be talking about supporting the Black community year round, and the fight against systemic racism requires sustained commitment and action year round? This is a day commemorating Juneteenth is significant to show solidarity to the Black community. But I focus on a very specific ways that Juneteenth impacts me and my community and in my family, and how I feel when we're celebrating Juneteenth. So today, the current Black experience, of course, is very, very significant. We could say we made some progress, but have we really made some progress? There's still racial disparities, there's still systemic racism, and it still exists in very many facets in American life. So I had to ask myself, you know, I have a daughter that has sickle cell. Is she getting adequate services and adequate healthcare and adequate access? Like, if it wasn't for me being an educated Black woman, I don't think that she would get those same, you know, resources. So I just asked myself, how far have we come and how far do we have to go? And, you know, I look at this as like Black futures, Juneteenth as an implication to the future. It's a reminder that change is possible and that, you know, change can be achieved, but what are we doing to make that change happen? You know, I think about being a law student in a predominantly white class that looks to me every time a criminal law question comes up. You know how that makes me feel? I feel so isolated and feel in solitude. And I'm like, why do I feel so much pressure every single day walking up into a classroom full of white people at one time, and they depend on me to be the voice for an entire community of people? And the only other two people that are in there are inmates, incarcerated inmates, and they happen to be Black. And those are the only other two people. And that's who I relate to. So every time there's a breakout room, I want to go work with them. And my classmates don't want to go work with them. Why? Why not? why don't you guys want to work with this community of people that is very smart, very intelligent, and they're, they're there. And they're in the same position as you, learning the same information as you. So for me, it's essential to just remember and to celebrate this day and use it as a way to be a catalyst for conversations and policy change and advocacy and educational initiatives and so much more. So I just take a moment to just express myself and feel liberated to do more, to be more, and to serve my community.
That's beautiful. And I loved how you kind of stopped and you talked about, not just the experience of having a kind of imputed criminality, right, as a Black woman, right? This idea that we were talking about criminal law, you must be the expert because you must have experienced these things, right? Which is both a kind of racialized misogynoir, right? A racialized stereotype for Black women in particular, but it also speaks to a reality that everyone knows, right? How criminal code, right, renders Black women and renders Black people writ large. And then you kind of spoke about too, the experience, right, of being in a class with, our brilliant, right, incarcerated students, but even then knowing that just because you're behind bars, right, the brilliance of Black folks is not contained, right? And so I think it's so important for us to remember that even when we're in the hold, even when you've been indicted and convicted or whatever it may be, right, there's a type of embodied knowledge and a well of knowledge that springs eternal. So I just want to affirm you and thank you too for lifting up those students, right? Even, and I mean, you haven't talked about, and of course we don't really know what their experience is. But if they're watching this, if they're able to be present, able to see this later, if you're able to talk to them in your future classes, I hope that they will know that they have our support and our pride for being able to walk into a law school virtually while behind bars, right? Understanding the law that has them incarcerated. I think that's a beautifully resilient thing to do. So I applaud them, and I also applaud you for standing in solidarity and affirming their brilliance. Ashlyn.
Hi. So when I thought about your question, I felt conflicted at first because I think it's important to remember and acknowledge all of the sacrifices that Black people made for us to even celebrate, Juneteenth. But then I immediately, and that made me sad, that felt heavy, it felt heavy to try to wrap my mind around all of the Black bodies before me to be in this place today where it's a federal holiday. It was too much. But I immediately felt joy. And so when Jillian was talking about joy as an act of resistance or rebellion, I was like, that's what I think of when I think of Juneteenth. And immediately, I've been working on connecting my memories to songs, to smells, to feelings, to what I'm wearing. And so when I think about Juneteenth, I just close my eyes and I hear Stevie Wonder, Songs in the Key of Life. I hear Sir Duke. I hear it playing. And I smell rib tips and barbecue sauce and potato salad. And I feel the sun on my skin. And I'm outside on the north side, surrounded by beautiful Black people who maybe, didn't pick today to feel that heaviness, but picked today, Juneteenth, to feel this like immense joy of being Black and being free. And so, when I think about what Juneteenth means to me, all of my memories revolve around those feelings, and, part of me, I'm like, we have to acknowledge the sacrifice. We have to acknowledge what it took for us to get here. We have to acknowledge how we're still working toward equality for Black folks. But at the same time, I choose joy. Like, I choose Juneteenth to wear all Black in the middle of summer, real Black. I choose Juneteenth to be in my community, to walk the streets, to talk to people, help people's grandmothers, at the food shelf. Like, I choose joy when I think about Juneteenth. And so I guess like my challenge for everyone here today, for everyone listening, for everyone who will watch this, is to find a little bit of joy in Juneteenth. Outside of acknowledging and remembering and continuing the good fight, it's a day of celebration, like it's the day that we were free. And I know a lot of the times it doesn't feel like we're free and, in 2023. But I think if we focus on some of the small parts of like what makes being Black a enjoyable experience, then Juneteenth can become something that we never imagined. So yeah, and I struggle with that, just kind of going back and forth about, what it means, but what it can mean, and then what it means to me personally, growing up in Minneapolis on the North Side, where every year we had a Juneteenth celebration, and it never felt wrong. It always felt like this is exactly where we were supposed to be. It always felt like I belonged. It always felt like support and love, like a big hug, a big Black hug. So yeah, I really love what Jillian and Demetria have said. And I resonate with that, but I just have like a totally different first thought. When I think about it, I smell the sun and barbecue, and reflecting on what it means to be in community as a Black person, as hard as it is to be a Black woman in this world, a Black attorney in our field, to be Black in Minnesota, that is very difficult. We have to find our little pockets of community and peace and joy. And so I would just challenge everyone this Juneteenth. Hopefully y'all not working, because I feel like our ancestors would just like roll in their graves if they knew y'all was working on Juneteenth. Just clock out. You shouldn't be working. But yeah, I just challenge everybody to use Juneteenth to find a little bit of joy this year.
Yeah, I mean, I really resonated like with what you were saying, and also Jillian, about this notion of joy, right? And choosing joy, and joy is a radical act. Because, when we think about our ancestors and we think about, what does it mean to be taken from your homeland, with a bunch of folks that do and don't speak your language, to be stacked 17 bodies high in the bottom of a musty ship, right, across the Atlantic. And when we think about the humanness of this, right, people are going through their menstrual cycle, folks are pregnant, right, folks can't even see, like it's dark down here. And then to come here and still be able to summon moments of joy, to still create things like a cakewalk, right? To still, even after a long day under slavery, whipped backs, right? All the type of sexual violence that happens to both men and women, and folks at that time that we don't understand to call non-binary or trans, to still under the moonlight, right? Make yourself a little bit of type of moonshine, have a drink and dance and praise God anyway. That is amazing. Right? Because I think about the bad days that I have at work, and I don't want to think about no, I want to lay in bed, just turn the lights out, right? But in those moments, to choose not to be emotionally or spiritually defeated, I mean, that is just, it's truly, truly something. And then this notion of hope that Ashton brought up as well. I can't imagine being under slavery and understanding that I'm not my own property, my children are my own property, but to still love them as a mother, to still love them as a father, even being separated, right? And then have a hope that slavery one day will end. How can you hope that when it's been 400 years, right, Duray? So thank you for reminding us of that, because I do think that that is an inheritance that sometimes we forget, because anger is so natural, but joy is so supernatural, right? And our ancestors continue to choose that again and again. Not to say they weren't angry, and God bless Nat Turner, we needed him and Harriet Tubman too. But those moments of joy sustain us as well. Calandra, what you got for us today?
Well, I don't think Ashton's gonna like this. I do, I do work a little bit, but let me tell you what I work on. That is my time to reset. So I work on what I can do better for my people, because helping my people as their public servant, I've been able to find my own well-being. I grew up with my grandparents who would take us to Selma, Alabama every year. And we would celebrate Juneteenth before there was any holiday, before, anybody really cared. But it was always a reminder of what we need to do more. So we didn't have New Year's resolutions. We waited till Juneteenth and said, this is the next thing we have to do. So I do work a little bit, Ashlyn, but I'm trying to help my people because, I go to the jail. And Dr. Wilson, when you talk about those bodies stacked and menstrual period and pregnant, it's so hard when you still see it today in the flesh.
Yes, yes.
And just Monday, I conducted a mediation CLE. And the title of the CLE was The Power Imbalance. And that's when one party has social power over another. And I talked about the imbalance of race in housing, education, the law, the medical field, and housing. And I talked about how white people don't care about our race or our mental health in all of those areas. And Black people, even when they go to the courthouse, the tension your body feels
Yes.
to walk into that building and you don't even see your own people. The feeling that comes over and how we express it is often taken as a negative for white people.
Mhm.
And you go into the courtroom, you don't see Black lawyers, the judge isn't Black, and you automatically feel like you're convicted. And
Mhm.
that starts from the moment you walk into that building.
Mhm.
So even in mediation, guess what? The mediator's white, the other party is white, and chances are they have a white lawyer. So the power imbalance happens more than people realize.
Mhm.
Those of you who are my Facebook friend, you probably saw that story I posted about what happened to me at the farmer's market. I don't know if you read it, Dr. Wilson. It's
Mhm.
public. I made sure it was public. So I'll just briefly talk about what happened. So
Take
I
it
was
out. Go ahead.
so I was paying for my Polish, and I put on there, yeah, I eat pork. Okay, so I don't want a bunch of emails and messages from the vegans. Okay, I eat the swine. So I was paying for my Polish, and the cashier said, she said, you see that woman over there? She said, would you ever put your child on a leash? And I looked over, this white woman had her maybe 3 or 4-year-old on a leash. And I cleared my throat because I never pass up a moment to educate. Because remember, I said I get to be me. And I said, I would never want anyone's child on a leash. But as a Black person in slavery, we were always put on leashes. I
Mhm.
said, and my ancestors are turning over right now that we have to have this conversation in 2023.
Mhm.
And she looked at me and she said, I never thought about it from a Black perspective.
Mm.
I said, I'm a free Negro as you
Mhm.
are free. So if you want to read the story, just go to my page. But I notice as the days get closer to Juneteenth every year, my mind starts to think about what more can I do? And the older that I get, the more empowered I am to do more. So that's what I think about Juneteenth. I love Juneteenth, but it's a time for me to reflect, but
Mhm.
it's also a time for me to prepare.
Mm.
So that's what I do.
Mhm. Mhm. I love that last line, a time to reflect and a time to prepare. You're
Mhm.
giving us very Harriet Tubman vibes right now.
Yes.
But I also, would like to lift up a person assigned female at birth, but later to be non-binary, Pauli Murray, right? We don't talk about Pauli Murray very often, but for those of you that do not know, Pauli Murray was the actual architect of the civil legal rights movement. They were a student at Howard Law. They became the intellectual mentor of the Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They wrote the article, The New Jane Crow, right? To talk about the ways in which anti-Blackness and sexism intersect, right? To create the kind of paradigms that all women across race live under. So definitely look up their work. They're an amazing poet. They also became, I believe, an Episcopalian priest. So Pauli Murray was just that person, right? So definitely look them up, and they were a mentor to Thurgood Marshall at Howard Law as well. So definitely look up their work. And so I've been thinking about and listening to all of your reflections, and I had already a dozen questions I was going to ask you. And while you were talking, it probably looked like I was a little distracted. I was writing 24 more questions. So now I don't know where the hell we're going to start. So bear with me. This is going to be interesting, but I hope it's live. And also, for the panelists, if there are questions you want to ask of each other and jump in, do that. This is a very Black space. This is not some formal panel where, you gotta do your thing and fix your tie and wear a business suit. Be free, let your hair down, ask the questions and give the commentary and come off the mute if you want to give an amen or whatever. You don't gotta be on mute, do your things. So one thing I did want to ask, right, and we kind of talked about starting, with what you just said, Kalendra, about this idea of like, I've never looked at this from a Black person's perspective. And one thing that has been bothering me since I was a 1L in law school is the law as it's taught is never imagined from any Black person's perspective. A Black man, woman, child, non-binary, trans, queer, Black, low-income person. We can think about the notion of who the reasonable person is. Or would you have felt free to walk away from an officer? Or, would you know, should you have known, did you know, or would you have known, should you have known under the circumstances, right, what the law is? Ignorance of the law is no excuse. So I bring all these questions up because I wanted to kind of think about it. I want to ask you all about, in this current moment, at the kind of white lash to Black Lives Matter, what is the serviceability of these kind of book bans in schools, high schools, some now colleges, sometimes libraries and cities? What is the point of all of this, right? And we know we can talk about censoring speech, but I'm connecting this to Kalendra's question or thought earlier, right, about this idea. I've never thought from a Black person's perspective. What is the serviceability of these book bans and the kind of censorship of history seen in Florida, and which is a hotbed, right, of kind of censoring Black lives in text, whether it's book bans or whether it's the idea that Black studies can't be taught, and what is the effect of this? What should we be concerned about? Anyone can jump in.
I think there's a lot to be concerned about, because one of the other things that's happened, I don't know if you saw this on CNN yesterday, Dr. Wilson, about the number of schools that have scrapped their DEI efforts
Mm-hmm.
and professors, because they say it's useless
Mm-hmm.
and it's ineffective.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going from books to departments
Mm-hmm.
and to professors. I think there's a bigger problem on the horizon. It's that power imbalance, and it's going to hurt our people if we don't do something. So,
and entrenchment. What do the rest of you think?
I agree. I think, what's that saying? If you get the poorest white man and tell them that they're above another group, they'll give you the dollars to continue to subject them and control them. I think the idea is really that if you create this targeted movement towards one entity and you create a common enemy, then you can unite to counter the sort of, thriving Black movement that we've seen over the last few years. I think Black Lives Matter, I think, the protests that came after George Floyd really scared the racist white community, and they're using the sort of crazily successful state bans that are happening to sort of create change on a national basis. And seeing what's happening here is also reminding me of what's happening in Kenya at the time, currently right now. There's a strong anti-gay movement that's happening within Kenya because there was a group that was trying to be governmentally recognized, and it went to the Supreme Court. And President Ruto sort of used all of the religious organizations to create this like national statement that was subtly against the gay community within Kenya. And really it wasn't because he cared about it, but he knew that he could unite the country to care about that and ignore the economic disparities that were happening under his presidency. I think the same thing as far as is happening here. It's a big distraction. It's trying to distract us and create this false sense of, anger against one community because it's easier than trying to fight everybody.
And just to comment on that really quickly, we do have the name, right? Black anti-Blackness. And that's what Black homophobia and that's what Black transphobia is, right? These are Black people, right? That we are saying are disposable. And I think it's also important to know, and I'm glad that you brought this up, Jillian, that, these organizations in Kenya, in Uganda, in Somalia are funded by white Southern evangelicals in the United States to the tunes of hundreds of millions. And I think the latest report was billions of dollars, right? And so that's something that we really need to be mindful of, because the conversation in the media becomes, look at these backwards Black people in Africa. They want to kill and burn gay people at the stake. When in reality, the ideology, the funding, and even the legislation comes out of the American South and the churches, right, that proclaim the kind of sanctity of life, right? Also through the kind of this backwards argument, right, about the idea of like women's bodies can be regulated by the state. And I'll say this and shut up because I want to hear y'all talk. But I also think it's really interesting when we think about the Dobbs decision, that this was coming out of the idea of a right to privacy. When you think about Black women and you think about Black people in general, this is a badge and incident of slavery. This idea that Black people are not able to have control over our reproductive organs, this idea that we can be compelled to reproduce, is something that I think smarter people should have argued at the courts, right, is actually in contravention of the 13th Amendment. But that's neither here nor there. Demetria or Ashlyn?
I can jump in. So I just appreciate all of these perspectives, because I'm sitting over here like, I'm so mad, right? Like I'm this new law student ready to just advocate and go. And what's so crazy is I will go to the state house and advocate. And why am I the only Black person in the whole building? I am sitting there and I will meet with the representative and say, I want to create systems change. I'm here to try to encourage a policy to help bring funding to the Black community. And I am the only person there to testify. And the representative had audacity to tell me where we don't show up. And I said, and I looked back and I said, okay, we don't show up. Okay. So how do we show up? Right? This idea of showing up and what does Juneteenth mean to me as a Black woman, and how do we show up to celebrate and to bring joy? But then how do we show up to really help ourselves when it comes to taking action and really impacting our communities and our society? We talked about, women not having rights over their bodies. Black women haven't had rights over their bodies, and we still don't have rights over our bodies at this very moment. Talk about freedom. What about freedom of just trying to be able to feel safe and secure and not feel judged when you walk into a predominantly white institution? Are we really free? Is that a space we can talk about? Or are we not trying to talk about that yet? Because I still feel the pressure. I still feel that space where I don't feel free. I don't feel like I'm accepted, and why do I have to fight that? We already have to battle all these other areas of oppression on a regular basis. So when I think about everything you all are saying, I'm thinking of how can I continue to keep advocating, but I'm tired sometimes. Are you guys not tired? Sometimes I come home and I'm just like, wow, from 6 a.m. to now, I'm just advocating on behalf of myself, on behalf of my family, on behalf of people in the street that I don't even know.
Mhm.
I'll stand up and say something. But the point I'm making is that I'm thinking about Juneteenth and I'm thinking about healing. I went on this deep healing journey and I want to heal and I want to feel like I can just be free. And that's how I want to feel every single day. So it holds deep significance to me, but I'm also in a space where I'm balancing healing and this peace, but all this advocacy and righteousness. And so we really have the freedom that we deserve.
Yeah, and that's really, go ahead, Kalendra, go ahead.
Can I just say two things?
Yeah.
First, Dr. Wilson, to your question about books, I feel like a lot of white people want books banned because they don't want their children to feel guilt or responsibility for what white people have done to us. And they want to just wash away this whole idea of slavery and inequality and the persistence of this institutional racism that we have to deal with every day. And that goes into, Demetria, your point. You know, some days I am so tired, but let me tell you, I get it all out in the car on the way home. Okay.
I've heard you.
Because I got to come home. You know, I'm going to make my greens, you know,
Yes.
or whatever I need to make. That makes me feel good because the next day I'm going to do it again because I know my work produces everyone on this Zoom. It makes a way and provision for you to have better access to a law degree or whatever else you need to do. I don't feel like my work is unseen or for nothing. If I can help one, that's enough. My goal is to help millions. Whatever I need to say or whatever I need to do. So I know, you know, it is tiring, especially when you're a parent. My son is 29, and I think I stopped carrying him on my back probably last year. Okay. But you may find that you may need to fight for your child in more ways than one. My goal was to make a better space for him as a Black man, but little did I know that I was going to have to fight for him as a gay Black man.
That's right.
And that makes me even more empowered because I realize that it's our gay Black men and women and queer men and women that need us. So yes, it is tiring, but sister, you just get up in the morning and you do it all over again because it will be well worth it.
Thank you. Thank you, Kalendra. I had to put in the chat. I said, we're going to keep going. We're going to keep striving. We're going to keep going. So yes, I wanted to touch on that too. I'm tired, but I'm wide awake. Best believe me.
Oh yeah. I was whooping on some people in court and trial this morning.
Yes.
And I did well. And guess what? I'm gonna do it again tomorrow.
You're gonna do it again tomorrow morning and be ready every day, ready and prepared.
Yeah, I'm just dropping some quotes in the chat because Audre Lorde always has a whole bag for us, and I feel like people don't read Lorde. So read this Black lesbian woman's work because I put it in the chat. Ashlyn, did you have a comment?
Yeah, you know, we're talking about how tired we are, and it makes, I don't know, I feel like I'm transitioning to this new way of thinking about caring for myself as a Black woman. And while I admire and respect, and I even have it myself, like this urge to fight, you know, take care of everyone around me. We do it every day. And I think that's why I take moments like Juneteenth to find joy. This is not the day for me that I, you know, feel like I need to just go so hard, because a quote that you put in the chat, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation. As Black women, like since we came to this country on boats, all we have done is cared for our children, our husbands, our families, the church. Like we've educated, we've nurtured, we've pushed, we've advocated, we've made policy, we've changed, like we have fought. And the older I get, the more I realize that I can't pour from an empty cup. And so I have really been focusing on ways to find little pieces of joy within the struggle. So it's like every day we wake up and we go to work and we're fighting, we're advocating. Outside of work, we're on boards, we're part of, organizations, we're fighting, we're going to advocate at the state. Whatever it is that we're doing, we have to remember to fill our own cups in whatever way that looks like. And I feel like Black women don't do that enough because we're constantly thinking about how we can take care of everyone around us and forget to look in the mirror and go, sis, what do you need? And so I'm just in this really interesting phase of what it really means to take care of myself. And I feel like Juneteenth is a day that brings me joy. And so I just want to be. I don't want to have to be the lawyer or, I just want to be Ashlyn, who is Black. Like sometimes, I don't know, I'm kind of ranting at this point, but I'm feeling conflicted these days about how I show up at my job, how I show up in organizations that I'm part of, how I show up for my community. How do I show up for Ashlyn? And I don't know.
Well, there's
You
a
know what?
split here. There's a split here. That might come to you, Calandra.
Yeah.
There's this, so I just put in the chat this book called This Bridge Called My Back. And it's a collection of essays by radical women of color, predominantly Black women, Indigenous women, and Latinas, and mostly Afro-Latinas. And it was written 40 years ago. And they're speaking exactly to what Ashlyn's talking about. Like, what does it mean that your back as a Black woman is a bridge to freedom, is a bridge to care, is a bridge to joy by a thankless community, right? For a thankless community, rather, whether it is partners, parents, children, cousins, strangers. And what do we do? What do we make of the compelled emotional labor, right, that Black women, and I would venture to say that Black queers and non-binary people do as well? What does it mean to be compelled to be an emotional mule oftentimes, right? And not just emotional, spiritual, right? Physical, we're talking about who runs the movement, but also doesn't get the credit for it, right? So it's important for us to kind of sit with the meditation and the kind of radical intervention that Ashlyn's giving to say, the ability to say hell no. The ability for the world to be on fire and Black women to put their feet up and sit down and get a massage, right? That's unheard of because there is some type of indictment and some type of compelling idea that if you are a Black woman, your duty is care, your purpose, right? And I always go back to the Dred Scott decision because I think it's so important. It's an embedded law and it's embedded in society, right? Is to give service or labor for life. And if that does not define Black women, I don't know what does. But then we turn to Calandra and we turn to what Dimitri has been saying too about this idea of another radical intervention, to live otherwise and always interrupt and intervene, right? So I love this, and the point of me bringing all of you together is to sit with the complexities, right, of all of the calls upon our life. And I think I can speak, even not being a Black woman, but for everyone in this panel to note that like all of this is situational. One day, the world is on fire and you're like, baby, let it burn. I can't be bothered. Another day, the world is on fire. You're in the middle of the flame, right? And what does it mean to make those decisions? And I think the most radical part of all of this is when you give yourself permission to consciously make the decision and not be compelled by other people's expectations of you. I'm sorry, go ahead, Calandra.
So I just wanted to point out a couple things to Ash and the other ladies. You are also beautiful too, by the way. All of you. Oh my gosh.
How are you, Sandra? You look so beautiful. I like your top, the colors. I just want to say that back. So thank you.
Thank you. These are fight colors. Yeah.
I noticed that. I wanted to shout that out, but I didn't want to say it, but you gave me the opportunity. So thank you for that.
You all are so beautiful. But I just wanted to tell you, when I was younger, when I was your age, I did feel like I wanted to just do everything. And I felt like I was getting worn down, because you do get tired of the fight. I had to learn a few things. The first thing I had to learn, say no, okay? Learn to say no, and it's okay. Learn to give pushback. If it's too much, it's too much. About my third or fourth year in private practice, I learned from another lawyer, every 90 days, you need a vacation, because you will find every few months, different parts of your body will start to shut down. You can't sleep, you can't think, you're getting confused. You have to take a vacation.
Come on, Pastor.
Whether
Come on now.
whether it's going away for the weekend, a long weekend, whether it's a week, you have to turn it off. So if that judge says we're scheduling a pretrial, say, Judge, I'm not available. And you look him right in his face. And he bringing up, I'm not available that day either. Because guess what? White folks do it all the time. And I noticed that. Do you notice we'll even be afraid to call in sick, knowing
Yes.
we don't feel good or we just tired? You can take a mental health day. I am giving you permission right now. You could take a mental health day. If you can't do it, you just can't do it. If you wake up one day and say, I don't want to do it today. Just say no. Because
Yeah.
people tend to think when Black women do 50 million things, they think that we don't need help, we don't need support, and they think that they can put even more on our plate. So your relaxation, say no and take that vacation, take that break. Even if it's sitting outside barbecuing on a Monday, I'm giving you permission to do that. So
Mhm.
I understand, and I love to travel. That helped me to find myself too,
Yeah.
is to get out of this country and to see Black and brown people, to lay on the beach.
Mhm.
And what we have, let me tell you, so many people in this country take advantage of what we have, where we have people living off of less and are much happier.
Yeah.
So go there, take a break. And if you don't have your passport, go get it and get some stamps in. I'm not talking about food stamps. Get that passport stamped, okay? So
Yeah.
that's all I wanted to say.
I think like my newfound way of thinking or analyzing all of this is like 1 year post graduating law school, and just like how much my life has changed and how busy I am and all of the pressure that I feel to be good at my job and be a good friend and be a good Black person in my community and show up and do all of these things. And I'm like, hold up. I need a break. Like, I just need a moment. And so I think that's kind of where it's just like 1 year post law school, like they should do, what is it? Like the True Life series? It's like True Life, 1 year post law school. Like, where are you? How are you feeling? Because it's a mess. But yeah, I totally agree. Just like taking care of yourself and whatever that looks like and how that shows up for you is important.
One thing I would like to add to you, Ashlyn and Calandra, I just want to say that the travel and the breaks are so important, but to add is that one thing I will say is that I take annual trips to Africa and I do not want to come back. I want to stay there and just be, because I agree with you, they are there, and there's the humility and how humble and how much love and just power I feel on the soil is just amazing. And so taking that break and then coming back here, it feels like night and day difference. And so I try to jump in and say that is important to take those breaks and to just be, but just to also remember about how happy our people are with so little in other places in the world. And we're dealing with this fight every day and tired every day, but the people that I'm around are just embracing so much love and positivity and good energy and dance and food and smiling and like celebration, and like how important that is to our culture. So I just take that with you to say, travel. Schedule
Yes.
a mental health day, y'all. It's on there. Do it.
I love that. And I'm going to just switch gears, Jillian. I'm going to come to you with the first question because I think you might be able to speak to this a little bit too. But one, I also want to underscore what Glendra was saying. I don't request you take a mental health day. I demand it. Take a mental health week. Call in Black. Be free. Call in Black woman the second day. Call in Black queer the third day. Call in Black and tired the fifth day. Like, just call in because it's too much. We deserve a type of reparation, and we ain't got it yet. So you got to get it day by day, by and by. But I wanted to ask, and I'm going to bracket these kind of three questions as one. Jillian, I wanted to ask you too. You talked about this a little bit, and I'm going to ask three questions. So bear with me. You know me, girl. Being from Kenya, right? Like, what does this mean? Thinking about Demetria's question about being in Africa and being in an all-Black space, what does Juneteenth mean to you? Right? What is its broader meaning to the rest of the world? Maybe there is none, but I want to kind of sit with that. Like, what does that mean for you? Because I think about when I'm in South Africa and I think about when I'm in Ghana, right? That when I'm in an all-Black space, I don't have these assumptions on my body where my body is operating as an incriminating body of evidence already, right? The first time I went to Africa, it was so interesting because I disappeared. Didn't nobody notice me? And that has never happened in my entire life. And that's a beautiful thing. So I want you to personally sit with that and think about that. But then I also want to kind of us to think about like law school, right? And what was the kind of worst or most impactful experience for you as Black women with the law or with law school? And then finally, in this kind of end of the bracket of these questions, what is required of law schools and law professors? And I'm not saying what is required as in what are the rules, right? But thinking from a lens of a Black woman coming through law school, experiencing law professors as you have, experiencing the assumptions, experiencing doctrinal law, Black letter law, and even the ways in which law professors engage with you, what in the hell is required, right? For you to be there and be affirmed as a human being on equal footing. So I'll start with you, Jillian. You can answer any of those that you want. I know it's a mouthful, and folks can jump in and popcorn and answer whatever bits and parts. Just let it be a free-flowing conversation.
Yeah, that's a great question. Piggybacking off of what Demetria said, I was just home in 2022 this past summer, and it's the first time I had been home in 8 years, and I forgot what it was like to just exist as like a Black person and nobody mind. Like, nobody paid 2 seconds. The only thing that like marked me was that I was wearing American clothes. So they're like, that's a foreigner, but she's one of us, but she doesn't live here anymore. And I just remember sitting in the matatus and just watching women walk back and forth. Some of them were with their kids, they were shopping, they were wearing their natural hair, or it was just in some quick plaits, or they were just wearing box braids and no makeup. And it was just something to see Black women live authentically as Black women and not have to cater to any of these standards of like professionalism or what is neat here in the States, because I, for some reason, forgot that I didn't have to do any of that. And I went in with a full sew-in. And I was like, my hair has to be ready. I have to look good. I've forgotten how to speak my own language. I have to make up for it in some way. Like, I have to look presentable. And I get there, I'm like, damn, I forgot I am Kenyan. What is wrong with me? Like, I just need to exist as like a human being. And thinking about Juneteenth, I didn't think about what my existence as a Black woman meant until I moved. And even then, it didn't really dawn on to me until I was in middle school, because I went to an all Black elementary school. There was like 10 kids in each class that were white. And so I was introduced into Black American culture immediately when I came in. And thinking about it now as an adult and going through the traumas of being in a white racist society, I'm so glad those first 5 years were surrounded by Black people, Blackity Black people. Like, people who introduced me to like BET and rap music and, Black cartoons and slang that I didn't know. My parents, were traditional Africans. They're like, what the hell is happening to our child? We went from British English to, now I'm using AAVE, and they did not know what to make of it. And my principal was a Black woman. I needed those people those 5 years, because when I went to middle school, the first day of 6th grade, I sat at a table with a white girl and she got up and walked away. And that was the first time I was very aware of my Blackness and the fact that I was somebody to be escaped from, that I wasn't somebody to be, wanted to be around. And so I had that very jarring realization. And then going through school, I started to mask myself and started to, assimilate. Any of the assimilation I had before was just mainly a language barrier, and I didn't want to be picked on for sounding different, but it was never just because I was inherently Black. It was because I was a foreigner. That xenophobia coupled with Blackness is a whole other conversation. But that marked me in a different way. So yeah, being back home just reminded me what it was like to simply exist and to exist comfortably. And I didn't want to come back either, Demetria. I and my family did not want to send me back. They were like, ma'am, what are you talking about? You have so many people who will house you. And they would take me back if I went right now. So
And I will go with you, Jumbo. I know all the Swahili. I learned it.
We have a house now, so we got a room for you and Michaela. We can house both of you. But I'm ready to jump ship at any point, because I was reminded of that on my last trip.
Mm-hmm. The beauty of having a home to go to that's elsewhere is something. What are other? I put the questions in the chat as well, so you can review them again.
I like your question about what is required of law schools and law professors. And I think, I know that one of the reasons that Dr. Wilson, you've been so impactful at Mitchell Hamlin is because you push the envelope on this question. You require more from your colleagues and from the administration, and you push them to really think about what it means to be an anti-racist institution, what it means to be a law school in Minnesota that has Black students, what it means to be a law school that is teaching the law in a way that hasn't been taught or thought about before. And so I feel like enough people who are here today probably know that when I was at Mitchell Hamlin and the VP of BOLSA, that we just caused all kind of chaos last year, but good chaos. And I feel very strongly about holding the law school accountable, challenging them to be better, challenging our professors and holding professors accountable. And it's like, what does accountability mean? I've been thinking about that question a lot in my work at the county attorney's office, what it means to hold someone accountable versus punishment or consequence. But to really, kind of hold the school's feet to the fire. Like, you can't get away with doing the bare minimum anymore. You can't get away with teaching the bare minimum. You can't get away with thinking about things with this little mindset. And so I feel like it's a big question, like what is required of the law school and law professors? But I think it really comes down to students and professors like Dr. Wilson and other allies at the school, that when we want to push something, when we want to advocate for something, that we have that support. And so I feel like, and then I struggle with that too, like, is the burden on us? But at the same time,
yeah, I'm sorry, just interrupt you for a second, because I didn't want to ask that, like, is the burden on you to do that? And then I also just want to intervene and say, be specific. Like, what are the problems? And necessarily, you don't got to give the solutions, but as a Black woman in law school, what are the problems? Because there's going to be so many of your former professors that are going to be watching this, right? So speak your truth. What's the tea?
Well, the tea is the school is not, they say one thing and then don't actually hold professors accountable to follow what the school said they were going to do. So when the school declared themselves an anti-racist institution, I was like, oh, that's cute. Okay. But what does that mean? We had all kinds of issues with professors when I was there. Even for my 1L year, I didn't feel empowered to do anything about it until I met people like Jillian and Dr. Wilson and all of my other BOLSA members who were like, yeah, we should say something. We should speak up. The way that the law is taught, very ghetto, very white. Like when we talk, I think it was Demetria who talked about, just like, or no, it was Calandra who said that the woman said, I never thought about it from a Black perspective. And it's like, that's how we were learning the law. That's insane. As a Black woman to sit in a class and be like, well, did we think about it from this? Like, what about this angle? And everybody be shocked? That's insane, especially from a law school that is supposedly full of these great scholars and professors and writers and, thinkers. It's like, you didn't think about what it might be like for a Black person? That's strange. So that ain't really tea, because I don't want to do too much, but
I can do too much. Or Calandra, go ahead.
Sorry about the way that was my son who popped in and waved. And the dogs heard him, they're making a lot of noise. So I think that my worst experience when I first went into private practice was my first trial. I was in Hennepin County for trial call. And I was there with the other lawyers with my box. And when they called my client's name, I went to the podium and the judge said, "You're a lawyer?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "You passed the bar exam?" And you could hear a pin drop in the courtroom. And at that moment, I knew what a threat I was to the justice system as a Black female attorney. I went on to win that trial, by the way. And I think that what professors should do is I think professors should be transparent about what Black lawyers will experience when they get into practice. And I don't think that I was ever prepared for that. Even though I was the vice president of BOLSA, and I remember the change we were trying to make there. I remember we brought the Sounds of Blackness to sing, and there was so much pushback, but we did it anyway. And we were always doing something, especially with the African students too. But they did not prepare us for what we were going to experience in court. So I believe that's something that you should prepare students for. I can recall many experiences as a Black female attorney, and there was no one that I could talk to say, did this happen to you, or what should I do? Last Thursday, I spent 2 hours with Jerry Blackwell in his chambers. And we talked about, I'm sorry. We talked about his experience in private practice and how he also felt like there was no one he could talk to. And he said, we're still in the first. We're still doing things as the first. And, it's very disheartening, but law professors should teach students what it's going to be like. one of the things I started doing is many people don't know, but we're all family here now, right?
Mhm.
I took the bar exam 3 times. And let me tell you why I took it 3 times. The first time I had taken, back then it was Barbary. Now you have just a whole litany of, bar prep classes. So the second time I took, some more Barbary, they kind of help you again, replay, and did it again. So after the second time, Brad Colbert at Mitchell,
Mhm.
Brad Colbert said, look, I have a friend and he only tutors minority students who did not pass the bar exam. And he said, I'm gonna have you talk to him. And back then, his friend was over the Minnesota Sentencing Guidelines Commission. So he would have me come to his office during the week. We would take turns and we would sit at a little table in his office and we would do the written exam. On the weekends, we would do the multi-choice. Let me
Mhm.
tell you why I passed the third time. Because he said, Calandra, you're thinking like a Black person. And you can't think like that because a Black person didn't write this exam. And I said, what do you mean? He said, the criminal law questions. And he gave me an example. And I said, well, this person's going to jail, right? Or they're being charged with arson. And guess what? They weren't. He said, because a person in this example is a white person. And guess what? I passed. So now I started teaching this little private class. And it's for the bar exam. And whether you're taking it for the first time or you have to retake it. And every time they come into my conference room, I'll write on the board, think white today. Next class, white is right. Put your white cap on. And guess what? They pass. And that's something I think professors don't teach, is that the books we are reading, the law we are learning about is not written for us and by us. So we have to think, we have to put on that cap, and we have to change our thinking to pass that test. And once you pass that test, the things you can do in that courtroom, or whether it's someplace else. For me, my experience is in the courtroom, just because of my passion for my people in chains and shackles. But for you, wherever your space is, you get that degree, you pass that test, and you get in those spaces so you can be impactful. So that's my take on what professors should do. I'll stop talking so much now.
I just want to underscore that. I think that's beautiful. And then I want to get to the other folks. I know we're getting close on time, but we're Black, and so that's what we do, because time is irrelevant in Black space. But that being said, I think it's so important. And me and Ashton were really having this conversation the other day that, like, when when we take these exams or you're in class, like, you have to put on your anti-Black white hat, right? And anti-Blackness in the law will always lead you to the proper answer. That's just the reality. And even I tell my students, I'm like, look, when you're in my class, I want you to kind of think, like, what would the law be like if you're thinking about this from a Black lens, from an ancestral lens? What does justice mean if you think about it from the lens of the formerly enslaved, right? But when you take this damn exam, you're not taking this exam from the lens of the enslaved. You're taking the exam from the lens of the enslaver. And like, what does that mean? And I tell folks that, look, if you're in law school, particularly if you're a person of color, Black, Indigenous, Asian American, a conscious, white person who's anti-racist, if you feel like you're going crazy your 1L year of law school, and everything seems to stand in opposition to your personal experience, baby, you understand the law. That's a lawyer right there. That might be a judge. You got it, right? But if you feel like everything just clicks, something ain't right. So on the exam, you write the law's answer. But in your journal, in your mind, you continue that Black critique, that talk back against the law, right against the law, right? So if you're going crazy, just know you did it right. But other folks, Ashlyn, Jillian, Demetria, thoughts?
I kind of want to hear from people in the audience. I feel like we're just talking. What y'all talking about? What does Juneteenth mean to you guys? I don't know. I just want to talk.
Yeah, no, so that's fair. So if you're in the audience and you want to pop up, turn your video on, say some things. We come to the Black table.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of time left. And I just want to check in. Nobody?
All right, I guess I can say what.
Thanks, Julian.
No
Hey,
problem.
Julian. Hi, Julian.
Hey, and I've said this in Dr. Wilson's classes, sometimes very embarrassingly. But I used to be a big fan of the 4th of July. It used to be my favorite holiday, especially as a kid. The patriotism, fireworks, all of it. And it wasn't until like in my adult years where someone asked the question of why as a Black man do I celebrate the 4th of July, and it was actually a white guy asking, and it never occurred to me until he asked that, and it really destroyed that holiday for me. And so what Juneteenth does, it kind of replaces that joy I had for a sense of belonging, a sense of celebrating. We still barbecue, we still do it all, but lift every voice and sing is a very personal song for me, and I find myself listening to it a lot this week, and I will be listening to it a lot Monday, because it's just a part of who I am. And whether it's celebrating with others or just sitting at home and just celebrating how far we've come, it's just a reminder that I have something that people can't take away. So personally, that's what it means for me.
I love that. I remember, I forget, I think I was in high school, and my dad was like, on the 4th of July, he sent us this article. And when I opened it, it was this long speech in little tiny print. And it said, "What to the slave is the 4th of July." And I said, "Who's gonna read this, Dad?" And he's like, "I want you guys to just read this one passage." And so for a couple years in a row, we just read different parts of Frederick Douglass's speech or his memoir. And Julian, that's when it clicked for me. I was like, oh yeah, we go crazy for this holiday that we weren't free at. Like that's not really for us. So on the 4th of July, I wear Black every year as a small act of rebellion. I'm like, you won't catch me in no red, white, and blue. And it's crazy because my dad he's a veteran, my brother's a veteran. So we have all this pride and patriotism for the United States. But at the same time, I'm like, we were still slaves. Like we weren't free. And so that was just a little thing. But yeah, I love that.
Other folks on the panel, on the audience, jump up, jump down, tell us how you feel.
Yeah, I'd love to actually chime in. Can you guys hear me? Okay, let me, I am so sorry. I'm wearing my bonnet and I'm driving. I hope that is not an issue.
That's the Black thing.
Bonnet is pro-Black.
Yes.
Thank you. I did just want to chime in. I think Ashley made a really great point when she said, it's specific to being Black in Minnesota. That's a really great point, because growing up in Minnesota, there was for a while, like Juneteenth, I feel like it's more of like a modern day celebration for the rest of the world. You know what I mean? Like just beyond Black people and Black Americans and really anyone. So to me, it's like the differentiation between, the 4th of July and then Juneteenth. Like, I think that is such an important difference, and it's really important for like everyone to recognize it. And, it fills me with pride knowing that, this is no longer something that only more than just Black people know about it, which makes me happy, because even though I do love when things are exclusive to just us, I do also think that there's a sense of importance in, you know, just other people at least being educated on subjects that, you know, may be different from their realities. Someone mentioned at first their experience at the farmer's market when they kind of had to educate someone, a white woman specifically. I think moments like that are important. Clark, when the man just said, he mentioned lift every voice and sing. I heard that, like, I heard that because we play that song everywhere. Like, I haven't heard the national anthem once since being at Clark. It's been strictly lift every voice and sing. Like, I cannot, like, you know what I mean? Juneteenth to me just means so much that it's like, if never, like, now's the time where, you know, that's been my reality, and I could never have been more grateful. So I can't wait to celebrate this Juneteenth. As an HBCU student who is originally from somewhere like Minnesota.
Yeah. So wait, you're down here in Atlanta?
What was that? I'm sorry.
You're in Atlanta?
I'm in Minnesota right now, actually.
So
Okay.
this is my mentee.
Yes,
This is
mentee.
Diani. She
All America.
Hey,
Yeah, I'm picking up my little cousin from work.
I'm going to put my bonnet on right now.
Right. I love
This is-
it. Hey,
girl.
mentee.
Somebody
I'm so
walk off.
happy. Oh, Ashley, I love that you have a mentee. She in law school or going to law school?
she's at Clark right now, but she wants to go to law school, or she's going to law school. Not wants to, she is going to law school. She has
Yes,
2
ma'am.
years left at Clark, right? So yeah, I was just kind of sharing with her, and I invited her to this, and I wanted her to meet all of y'all. I'm like, girl, let me put you on with my girls at Mitchell Ham.
Yes.
Yes. So
Hold
I'm glad
up.
that you're here.
Come
I
on,
just
Victoria.
wanted to note that, you know, I do make an exception for the national anthem because Whitney Houston. Whitney. You know, Black people can transform a thing and remix it. I'm just gonna say that. And also, I love your bonnet. I swear Ashlyn stole this bonnet from my house and I cannot find it anywhere. I do not know where my favorite pink bonnet is.
Keep
And
it
I'm
real.
just gonna put that on the
Gosh.
recording.
I love him. He is hilarious.
This specific pink bonnet is a rite of passage, I promise
It
you.
is, because where is my pink bonnet? Like, that's anti-Black. Anyway, Jillian, you was gonna say something. What's going on?
Oh, I was just gonna say, tying to something that Ashlyn was talking about earlier about, you know, sitting and reflecting and, you know, experiencing joy. I just wanted to say that we should all take times to celebrate ourselves and celebrate our small accomplishments. That was something that was reminded to me before graduation, because my therapist was asking me, like, are you taking time to celebrate yourself? And I literally did not know what that meant for a minute. Like, I just think that as Black women, as Black people, we forget to just celebrate the small accomplishments, whether it's you were really depressed and you got up that day, like that, celebrate that accomplishment. If you graduated, celebrate that accomplishment. I think it's important this Juneteenth that we celebrate ourselves every day, celebrate yourself in some way. It's important. It gives us livelihood, it gives us a little bit of joy for just life in general.
This is true. Also, before we continue, because I also want to hear from Demetrius, so we heard from you for a little bit, but also panelists, you know, if you feel comfortable, put your info, whether it's a Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn, in the chat so folks can be in community and contact with you. Ashlyn has already led by example with a mentee out here. I'm going to call my grand mentee, hey girl. So let's continue to be in conversation, because to your point, many people don't get to have these conversations. Many folks don't have access to law schools, and people that are in law school still don't have access to these conversations. So it's important for us to model mentorship, to model community, and to model care work. Demetria.
Thank you. And as being a law student now, it's like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I talk about every day. So I have to answer the question about what we need to do as an at Mitchell Hamlin, because when I got to Mitchell Hamlin, I was like, well, why is there no other Black people in my class? I came here because of that. Like, that was what you are all about. Why, where are they at? And they said, oh, they don't apply. I said, oh, okay, well, let me go get some that are going to go apply then, and let's see what happens, because I don't want that to be the only barrier. So for me, I did not ever, like I said, know an attorney, see an attorney except on movies, right? Then when I got into law or was looking to go to law school, I was like, who can I talk to? So I reached out to every Black attorney. Every time I see one, I'm like, can I meet with you? Can I connect with you? And now I've been thinking about creating like a pipe, like how do we get women to, it's mentorship. Like how can we bring women from high school, from undergraduate into law school? I get messages, I'm not kidding y'all, like at least one message a day. And I feel so like inspired that people reach out to me with the dreams of going and attending law school, but are trying to overcome this fear of like failure, perfectionism, am I good enough? Like all of these things we tell ourselves, but we are enough, we're more than enough. We do a million things and still have a smile on our face every single day. So I love that you have a mentee. And I think that even though I'm not an attorney yet, I think women looking up to me, or younger women looking up to me, it's important, it's imperative for me to inspire and encourage and to reach my hand back, like all of you reach your hand back to me and help me, and continue to do that in a cycle. And we'll start seeing our numbers increase every year and keep advocating for ourselves. So I'm just thankful for this community, because when I'm in class, I feel in solitude, but now I know I have all of you to be there to support me, to encourage me, to keep motivating me to keep going, and to see how successful you all are just keeps me motivated. So thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you. And we are going to continue to try to increase our numbers and reach our hand back to every student that will want to come to law school, and find every resource, every program, every test prep program to help them get through the LSAT, to help them with resources to maintain, and all of those things. So I just want to say thank you. I know we're over on time. Dr. Wilson, how you feeling? Any other questions for anyone else? Or
So I was just, I was going to say that I wanted to give each of you a moment, right, to say your kind of final thoughts, your goodbyes, your charges for the folks in the audience and the community. And I'll just, start by saying that this was obviously a very lovely conversation. I'm also proud and inspired by each and every one of you, my sisters, my cousins, my aunties, and them, my babies and daughters. But I think it's important for those of you that are in the audience, that are in law school, that are thinking about it, or maybe may never ever go to law school, but are just impacted by the law, as all Black people are, that just because the law is anti-Black, that doesn't mean your vision of justice has to be, right? Remember that it's important for us always, 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 as Black people, other folks of color, and also allied and conscious white folks that are anti-racist, to imagine a world where the law is not anti-Black, and to get into the business of midwifing that world, get into the business of supporting those who are pregnant with that world, right? So this is our work. All of us have different roles, and the roles may change day to day, but we all have a role. We all have a responsibility, and we all have an ancestral demand to get down to business. And some of us, it's because our ancestors were in chains. Others, it's because your ancestors created the chains, right? And that means we have a different but equally strong imperative to uproot anti-Blackness from the law, not just as it's written, but also as it's practiced, from its precedent, from the womb to the tomb. This is our work. So what are your final thoughts, y'all? What do you give the folks?
If I can start, one of the things that has really helped me to deal with the whiteness in Minnesota, and being a Black female attorney, was I had to create my own group, my own environment. And I'm always open to mentoring and adding people to my group. And we will go out and have brunch. We'll go out and for happy hour, have a glass of wine. Or, if I'm watching the fight, because I love boxing, I'll invite folks over, because we need that. That's another way for us to decompress, is to just get around each other and talk about what happened at work. How do you cope with these microaggressions? How do we deal with, our supervisors, or, certain people? How do we deal with white people at the farmer's market? But we need that for ourselves and for each other. So if you don't have a group, your own tribe, you can create one or get in one, or, reach out to me. I put my information in the chat. I don't mind going to Golden Time to have coffee, because I remember when Golden Time on Selby and Milton opened up, and I would walk down there and study. So I know what it's like. So, I don't mind getting together and, let's create our tribe, and we can be strong together. So those are my comments.
Who's up next? Go ahead, Jillian. I see you.
I think, my comments would be something that Dr. Wilson often reminds me of is to take up space, and feel free to take up space. And I think that if there's one thing that I would encourage all of us to do, is to allow ourselves to, push down any feelings of imposter syndrome or you don't belong, and allow yourself to take up space authentically. You don't have to cater yourself to be a person that isn't you. You are valid in who you are as a Black person, as a human. It's okay to just exist as you're a human. I'm trying to live as if I'm still back home, and that I can just exist as just a human being walking around. And that is what's going to fuel me as a Black woman. And I want that for all of you, especially for those of you who are going to law school. Law school is no joke. It is no walk in the park. So like Calandra said, find your tribe. I found my tribe, and I'm so thankful for, we call each other the Cheetah Girls. So I'm thankful for my Cheetah Girls who got me through 3 years of law school and now get me through the summer. So that would be my final words.
Thank you, Jillian.
I'm going to jump in after Jillian, because Jillian, you were a part of my tribe. Okay. Let me just say this. Like, when I came to Mitchell Hamlin, y'all, Jillian was my whole sister. Okay. Like, Jillian, you're still my sister forever. I know you're gone, but just know. But seriously, y'all, I would talk to Jillian. I would go on breaks, and Jillian would just be there and come into school 3-4 hours early and be doing some work. And I would go in there. I would be in the morning sessions, and Jillian would be right there encouraging me. And I may have had a tough day, but didn't even know about it. And Jillian would just be there with this inspiration and just help me. And I know that seems like an ordinary thing, but that was the only person that was there in that office and in that space. And I just want to say that is true to have a tribe, and you were a part of that tribe, Jillian. So thank you for that. And I just want to say, I'm sending love to all of you, the love that we should embrace within ourselves, and then just the love that we should share within each other and our communities. This is so powerful. I'm empowered, and this is so powerful to me. And I'm just thankful for this journey, even though resilience was very key for me to keep going. Representation matters, community matters. So I continue to be hopeful despite the challenges. And I encourage all of you to be your authentic self, and don't change who you are for anybody, no matter what spaces you're in. Love yourself and send love, and reach your hand back to the next generation and inspire those coming up after you.
Ashlyn.
I challenge you all on this Juneteenth to create joy in your day, whatever that might look like for you. If that means you do absolutely nothing, do absolutely nothing. If that means you're out in your community, get out in your community. If that means that you're volunteering or advocating or whatever that looks like, I just want us to create joyful memories for Juneteenth. We endure a lot of pain every day. We endure a lot of strife. We are constantly working. We're constantly working. We carry this weight on our shoulders, especially as Black women. And don't add the attorney on the end, because that's a whole nother, you know what I mean? So I just challenge us all to find a little bit of joy in our Juneteenth. I've been geeked for Juneteenth because I'm just going to be outside. I'm going to be outside. I want to hear the City Girls. I want to hear Stevie Wonder. I just want to be outside. And so I think it's important to create joyful memories around Juneteenth, as well as acknowledging the sacrifice and hard work that it took for us to be free and be able to celebrate. But I think, you know, the more that we create joy around these memories and these days, the longer, I think those memories last longer. And so that is my charge, my challenge for all of you. And yeah, I just hope you guys have a safe and joyful and Black Juneteenth.
I want to thank everyone for their final remarks and folks taking time out of their evening to join us. I know I'm tired, so I know y'all got to be tired too, because I ain't even did nothing today. And I just, you know, final thing I will say is that, you know, we have to really take Juneteenth to kind of meditate on what does it mean to become our ancestors' wildest dreams, right? That oftentimes means unbecoming all the systemic ideologies that we've allowed ourselves to embody, right? So I hope that we take tomorrow to have joy, to be outside, as Ashlyn would say, to push forward, to intervene, to be actors, do all these things that make sense for you. Maybe it's rest, but also remember, right, that we often embody the systems that we're trying to tear down. So don't let yourself look in the mirror, right, and see systemic oppression. So I hope that we remind ourselves that nothing else, as Maya Angelou says, nothing will change unless you do. It all starts at home. With that, thank you all so much for coming and joining us. Hopefully you'll follow up with the center and follow our future events. But happy Juneteenth, good night, go to sleep, get some rest. Black care is rest, is joy. Bye, y'all.
Bye. Thank you all so much. Thank you for having us, Dr. Wilson. And thank you, Dr.
Bye.
Wilson.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Yes, thank you
Thank
for having
y'all.
us, Dr.
Thank
Wilson.
y'all.
Yes. All right.
Lovely.
Take care, everyone.
See ya.